Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Unexpected Goals. This is your Champions League quarterfinal second leg preview. Uh, this is going to be maybe a little shorter than the last ones because we have essentially, I would say, three ties that are just completely irrelevant and more than likely dead. I mean, if you saw my Champions League simulations on my Substack, I have, PSG. Barcelona and Arsenal all over 90% to advance to the semifinals. So, not that interesting comparatively to what the first leg was, but you know what? We'll still go through this. We'll still have some fun. Bayern Inter is a lot of fun, but we'll start on Tuesday with Aston Villa and PSG. Not this position Aston Villa wants to be in by any chance, right? Because if you think about it, the way Aston Villa plays, right? Especially in the Premier League, they're starting to transition to being kind of a team that can press opponents high. I mean, the one goal they got against PSG was John McGinn, nicked them from Nuno Mendes from their mid block, but they're dead last in the Premier League in danger zone losses forced. They're near the bottom in passes per defensive action. So that is an issue. That's a huge issue when you're trailing by two goals. You have to be aggressive out of possession. And facing a team like PSG, who in the previous meeting just had a 88.1% field tilt and 75% possession, how do you flip that on them? Right? How do you flip that? How do you gain control of the game? Or how are you actually going to be effective with the chances you have building up or the chances that you have in transition? They obviously hit PSG in transition and one of the few chances they had, but this is a pretty alarming stat. Like I already mentioned, 25% possession for Aston Villa in that match, 30 danger zone losses with only 25% possession. That's horrible. That's basically like every time you touch the ball, you're just turning it over. And as you can see from the image I'm showing you here on my YouTube channel, if you can, please go subscribe to my YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. PSG just went straight man to man and they just forced Villa to play long, or they'll just force a turnover. And we already know with Aston Villa, as you can see from the image that I'm still showing you, they're trying to get this passing triangle here, right? Or they're dropping in a striker deep to try and play to him. But it's just PSG's too aggressive. And oh, by the way, PSG's not going to let take their foot off the gas. They're going to keep coming and they're going to keep pressing because this is how you beat Aston Villa. Aston Villa is a team that if you're able to effectively press them high, and you're very elite and good at it, they will fall apart and they will turn it over. It's been happening year after year with Unai Emery. But it only takes elite pressing teams to really, really cause them a lot of problems, and PSG definitely is that. So that's a big problem for Aston Villa. The flip side of it is PSG. I mean, Villa, there were a couple things that I noticed for them defensively. It was very clear they wanted to play a very compact defensive structure, right? They wanted to reduce the space in between lines. They didn't want to allow PSG to play through the middle. And in some aspects, they did a pretty good job of that, if that's, the main goal. But, the two goals that PSG scored highlight how difficult they are to defend. Like, yes, you can close off the middle of the pitch, but when you allow their wingers and all their forwards to get into 1v1 situations, especially out wide, you are at the mercy of hoping that they don't finish some of the shots that they get. So, one thing I'm going to show you here, this is an image right here. This is the Kvaratskhelia goal, right to begin the second half. Um, the the still image that I'm showing you here, Kansa is looking back to see if someone's making a run into his half space, and Hakimi is right there, and he's going to make that run. So what happens is Kvaratskhelia gets isolated over here against the fullback. He beats him to the byline, and Kansa, who had already turned his head to make sure Hakimi wasn't running to the half space, realizes that Hakimi stopped his run, and he's trying to make up the ground and block Kvaratskhelia shot, and he goes top shelf and he beats Emi Martinez. These are the type of situations that, yes, you do a great job of closing off the middle, but even if PSG gets you 1v1, they're still that deadly. Now, one thing that also happened was is that there were a lot of times that Villa was playing like a 6-3-1 or playing six at the back, just something crazy that Emery's done this before though, so that's not anything out of the ordinary. But when you do that, your defensive line can get quite low. And what it allowed was is PSG just a lot of space right at zone 14, which is that space right above the 18-yard box. As you can see from the image I'm showing you here, that's Fabian Ruiz. That's zone 14 right there, essentially. And there were a lot of times that Aston Villa got way too low. And as you can see, there's nobody in the box for PSG right here. So they're just waiting outside that area because it's wide open and they were just freely taking shots. And because they're a great finishing team, because they have a lot of talent, they can finish those things off. So I don't know. It's just like good luck Aston Villa getting back into this. I really don't see a path or a way that they're actually going to get back into it unless there's a lot of mistakes from PSG and they just, or if Aston Villa just somehow turns into like, I don't know, Bournemouth or something, some type of elite pressing team. Dortmund Barcelona. This will be brief because it's over. Based on my simulations, I have Barcelona 99.4% to advance to the semifinals. Um, Dortmund's just got to try to take advantage of the high line. And here's something else I want to mention is that, the way Dortmund plays, and this is sort of a statistical aspect, right? And a theory behind what Hansi Flick is trying to do. If you're a team like Barcelona with the attacking talent that they possess, would you rather win a game 5-3 or 1-0? I mean, or excuse me, 5-4 or 1-0. Hansi Flick would say 5-4. And the reason for that is because 1-0 against any type of underdog, you open the possibility of one counterattack just changing a match. Right? If you're facing 5-4, there's nobody that's outscoring Barcelona at this rate. Maybe PSG would probably say probably the only team that could outscore Barcelona in the high back and forth one, which, you know, listen, I am an Arsenal fan, but I mean, PSG Barcelona would be a ton of fun for a Champions League final, but I'm looking ahead here. For Dortmund, I mean, they got to take advantage of the high line. They got to get really aggressive. They got to make a lot of passes in behind. They got to try to play direct over because Barcelona's still going to press up 4-0. But they only created 1.13 expected goals in the first meeting, or the first leg, excuse me. So I just don't really see a way that Dortmund's getting back into this. One way but some of the ways that Barcelona was breaking down Dortmund, because Dortmund was kind of playing a little bit of a mid block, and Barcelona really attacked the wings, which I was kind of surprised by. Barcelona's a big, let's overload the middle team. Rafinha stayed wide for most of the match instead of inverting into the middle. And what Barcelona honestly did is they were just pushing guys up to the final line, and they were just making really aggressive passes. You can see from the image right here. Fermin Lopez makes a run, which basically forces the fullback to be pinned inside to make sure he can cover that run, and it's just a switch ball right to Lamine Yamal, who in 1v1 situations is going to win that battle every single time. And as you can see for this from Mark Stats, Lamine Yamal was by far the highest guy in terms of expected threat in the match. So, it's one of those things. And then, as the match progressed and Barcelona got ahead, uh, they took advantage of what's been plaguing Dortmund for a long time. And, Kovac has done a little bit better job of this because he switched to a mid block. But Dortmund's transition defense is horrific. They have no ball winning in the midfield. And, I mean, this pass by Yamal, I can't show you the video, but I'll show you two still images. It was absurd. But Dortmund just didn't track back. Yamal just played this crazy ball in basically like right through the defender, and in behind. And as you can see here, in behind, free cross to Lewandowski, boom, 3-0 ball game. And then the final one, Barcelona got a 3v1 on the break, and it was just over. So there's just really no way back into this for Dortmund unless they just again take advantage of the high line, which Barcelona will give them, but that also implies that they're going to have to press and actually stop Barcelona and give them a lot of space, which is also a very dangerous game to play. So it's over. All right, let's move on to Wednesday. Let's do Inter and Bayern, the one tie that is actually in the balance, I would say. And I would say Inter got quite lucky to get away with a 1-goal advantage out of Munich. Final expected goals via Opta. I'm showing you the image right here. 2.65 to 1 point, or excuse me, 0.91 for Inter. And as you can see from this rolling XG graph here, is that Inter didn't really take many shots up until their final goal, their second goal. They were really trying to defend the lead that they had. And Bayern, honestly, kind of struggled breaking down Inter's slow block. And they were trying to create overloads in wide areas. They were trying to free up their wingers to get in 1v1 situations because playing through the middle just really wasn't working. And as the match progressed, one thing I noticed that I think is pretty important is Bayern started sending in a lot of crosses. Now, I know that they don't want to do that for the entire match because Inter actually is number one among Europe's top five leagues with a 58% aerial duel win rate on average. That's domestically in Serie A. But Bayern did win 66.7% of the aerial duels in this match, which I thought was kind of interesting. Um, and you know, if you look at, I'm gonna show you the field tilt map right here from Mark Stats. A lot of Bayern's touches were in these half spaces right here. They did get some central area touches in with Inter, but really there was not a lot there in zone 14, which can make it kind of difficult. And as you can see, from those touches, they're just trying to get their wingers isolated 1v1. So how do they break down Inter here? Well, I mean, it's just kind of what I've said here. If they're going to send in crosses, which, as matches progress, and you can notice this from a lot of different matches, especially in the Champions League when teams are trailing. Once we get to about the 50th, 60th minute in that aspect, and things aren't working in terms of, wide or central overloads or trying to play through teams, a lot of teams just say, all right, let's just send crosses in the box and let's just hope for the best, because running out of options. And I think that might happen here with Bayern. Um, but Inter, when they were in possession, I think there was a couple interesting things to note. Bayern went with a full like man-to-man principle type of press. It was like a 5-4-1 in some aspects. And I'm going to show you an image right here. You can see what Inter was trying to do was drop their forwards in deep and play essentially combination passes here. But Bayern is very well pushed up on this, and they actually kind of pinned Inter into their own final third for a majority of the match. As you can see from the passing map that I'm showing you right now, not a lot of passes outside of Inter's own final third. In fact, I would say that they got pretty well dominated for large stretches. And that's kind of what Bayern's rest defense can do to you. Bayern is actually one of the best pressing teams in the world. I mean, we already kind of knew that. I saw it from SoccerMent that they lead Europe's top five leagues in G-Gen pressing, which is essentially intensity of counter pressing. Uh, they do an incredible job of pressing. So Inter just really struggled to find their way out. But eventually, as the match progressed, and when you play essentially man to man, especially on that last line of defense, the situation of the second goal is kind of important to note because it's something that Inter can do here in the second leg, even though they already are leading, and even though they're probably going to play very passive. Here, Martinez drops in deep, and he receives the ball, right? Well, Barea here is going to essentially beat his man. I can show you the next image. Beat his man and receive the ball from Martinez. And Boy, who came in late in the match at right back, he is forced because Barea is just running, right at goal. He has to come over and cover him. So once he comes over to cover him, Barea plays this ball in behind to Augusto. And as you can see, he's got acres of space and he sends across into Fertesi and Inter go up 2-1. But these were very few instances where Inter was actually able to successfully do this. But it also shows that when you play an aggressive man-to-man style, Inter's fluid rotations and can cause some problems with that. So very interesting tie to see what happens here in the second leg. It's definitely Bayern's definitely in this thing. It's not like it's not even close to over. It just comes down to how effective is Bayern at breaking down Inter's low block, and do situations like I just showed you happen more often because Bayern has to be more aggressive out of possession. It'll be interesting to see those questions answered. All right, and then finally, Real Madrid versus Arsenal. if you haven't watched it or you haven't read it, I did a tactical analysis of the first leg on my YouTube channel and then written form on my Substack, both free. Please go check them out. There may be some crossover or some images that cross over between these two naturally, as I've already done the analysis from the first leg. But Real Madrid really had no luck of playing through Arsenal's press. And what happened more often than not is they just kept choosing to go long. And that didn't work because Arsenal consistently would have a +1 on the last line of defense. And well, Real Madrid's forwards are not really built to win 1v1 duels and second balls, right? So, and especially against Arsenal, who's one of the best teams in the world at doing both those things defensively. But the other underrated aspect is that Real Madrid struggled to break down Arsenal when they were sitting in a low block. And as the match progressed, you can see from the image here, eh, Bellingham started to play in a more advanced position, which alongside Mbappe, which is generally a good thing, right? Because Bellingham is very very good in this like box crashing striker role. But you know, the other part of this was that by doing this, then he can't create wide overloads like he did earlier in the match. And like the image I'm showing you here, early on, Real Madrid was trying to create these type of overloads out wide because, well, that gets, these incredible wingers that they have into 1v1 situations and can cause them to do damage. But they really couldn't get anything going with these type of wide overloads. And honestly, Real Madrid for most of that first leg was playing very cautious. They were trying to slow the tempo down and they were trying to honestly just kind of stay in it. And if you look at, I showed it before, but Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr. were near the bottom in terms of progression, progressive passes and progressive carries. So I mean, listen, this one, unless Real Madrid's forwards just like pull off some magic, like unless Mbappe starts hitting stuff from 25 yards or Vinicius Jr. just starts like nutmegging people and putting in the back net, I don't see how they're getting back into this. Arsenal's too good defensively. In fact, I have a stat for you. Arsenal has only conceded over 2 goals in a match once over the past 2 seasons. I'll give you a second to think about who it was against because you're never going to guess who it was. All right, I'm sure you got the answer by now. It was Luton Town last year. That was only half an expected goal, but yeah, Luton Town is the only team over the past 2 seasons to score more than 2 goals against Arsenal. And in fact, Arsenal this season also has not conceded over 2 expected goals in a match that has ended 11v11. The only match where they have conceded over 2 expected goals this season was against Manchester City when they were playing with 10 men for pretty much the entire game. And then, I would imagine Real Madrid can control the possession here and maybe try to tilt the field on Arsenal. But when Arsenal was in possession, they were dominating Real Madrid tactically. And it's because Vinicius Jr. and Mbappe weren't doing much defensive work. So Arsenal was able to easily create wide overloads like I'm showing you right here. This is a 3v2 that they got against Bellingham. And because Real Madrid had to play so narrow to protect the middle of the pitch, because just like the image I'm showing you here, Arsenal was building out in a 2-3-5, and they were dropping Odegaard and Rice and Moreno deep, which forced Real Madrid to stay narrow and created those type of wide overloads. And honestly, Arsenal, like I mentioned in my tactical analysis, they were trying to isolate Bukayo Saka out wide, and they actually did a pretty good job of that. But the underrated aspect of this match is that Real Madrid's a horrible pressing team. I guess horrible I guess horrible maybe is the wrong word, but they're very average. In the match against Arsenal, they had a pass per defensive action of 17.7. They were very passive, like the entire match. That was very clear for anybody who watched it. But for the season, they're eighth in La Liga, which by nature La Liga is a pretty passive league comparatively. They're eighth in passes per defensive action and 12th in danger zone losses forced. And it's because their forwards aren't good at pressing. So when Real Madrid has to press and their forwards just don't do much defensive work and they aren't intense enough and they don't actually close guys down, it just leaves them so open to getting exposed over and over and over again. And Arsenal's going to do those type of central midfield overloads pretty much all match long. and try to isolate those wingers. And honestly, Arsenal is also a team that can play very direct as well. So if Real Madrid wants to press them, Arsenal's got no problem taking a low risk approach and sending it long. But with a 3 goal advantage, I mean, I have Arsenal like a 92%, a little over 92% to advance here to the semifinals. I mean, it would take something crazy for Real Madrid to get back into this. So that is your Champions League quarterfinal second leg preview. If you could do two things for me, if you're listening to this, please go give me a 5-star review on Spotify. I would greatly appreciate it. If you could subscribe to my YouTube channel and subscribe to my Substack, I would be forever grateful. So, thank you all for listening. Enjoy the second leg of the Champions League, although all these ties are pretty much dead. Maybe something crazy can happen, but nonetheless, it's Champions League football. Enjoy it.